So welcome to our Alissa and Craig show.
Yay!
Yeah. By the way, our last recording that we did on AI
Yeah.
got like a bunch of views. So people are like hungry for the leading edge conversation that you and I are developing. And so I just want to say, welcome to anybody who's here in the fourth wall right now. And what is poppin'? What is the thing that's top of mind for you lately? Because I will tell you, for me, it's been growth and expansion and learning how to do it with a measure of like simplicity, where I used to think it had to be like complicated and intellectual and very, I'm unlearning some really bad habits right now. How about you?
Very much the same way. I've been doing deep dives, and I've had to step back a little bit because I'm realizing that my friends are like, dude, you're talking about this way too much. Not be all AI all the time. I'm like,
Okay, so
but I gotta keep up.
yeah, but your obsessions can consume you. And I think I learned once, I think from Jesse Elder, who said like immersive learning is like following our curiosity to the point of obsession. And that way we get to kind of see the entire landscape and choose which pieces we're going to take with us outside of the obsession itself. So like, is there a way that your obsessions are showing up now in terms of like integration? Because I'm finding that's kind of what happens after we get obsessed over something. Like we pull back and then start to like drop it in places in our life.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm not at that point on this current iteration. I'm still deep in the obsessive point of this. I'm still trying to remind myself of key lessons I've learned in life, that'll help guide me through all of this.
Okay.
One, one of which is a memory from when I was in college. I went to Berklee College of Music, and in my senior year, I was trying to do too much. I had maxed out to do every single elective there was kind of my goal. It's like if it was a course I wanted to take it, and I had maxed out my schedule and I had optimized it so I could squeeze one more in. And in doing so, I had a class called Ear Training 4, which is the last ear training class of the school for
You said
graduation.
ear training?
Ear training,
Got
yeah.
it.
And I remember it's a lot of solfege and transcription and hearing things and being able to write it down and note what you're hearing and so forth. It's a component of music theory, at least in my mind. Anyway, I had 1 year training course that was at one time of the day, and I was like, if I shifted to this other class which is available, I'll take that one, and it will make everything work in my schedule. Thinking that the classes were completely interchangeable because they had the same class number. It wasn't until I got into that class that I realized that not all ear training 4 classes are the same. Some of them are a little bit easier, and some of them are with absolute monster professors. And my professor in that class was nuts. It was like drinking from a fire hose. It was so much harder. I felt like I had just skipped to ear training 40. The
Wow.
first day, I'm like, I am completely lost. And he's writing stuff on the board and he's racing it as fast as he can. And we're starting at tempos that are just crazy. And I'm sitting there like caught like a deer in the headlights, realizing this is my last semester at school. And if I don't pass this class, I don't graduate. Uh, and what have I done? What have I done? And I am desperately trying to focus on keep my eye on the ball and get myself through this. And I was probably 2 to 3 weeks into this, basically decided that my life is over. I have ruined everything. I cannot possibly pass this class, before I finally relaxed enough to actually stop looking at the front of the room and look around at my fellow classmates. And it was at that point that I realized they were all looking like they were deers caught in the headlights. And it wasn't just me.
Hmm.
That's when I went, I'm going to be okay. He can't flunk us all. He's going to be grading on a curve. I don't have to do this, ace this the way I did every other type of class I was in, at least not the same strategy. I just had to try to absorb what I can and then just relax into it. And that is probably one of the biggest lessons I got out of school was the pressure that you put on yourself can sometimes, because the panic that I had was starting to affect my other classes. I was like, what's the point of this? I'm not going to graduate. And it's like, so I'm relating to that now because it's like this, feel this desperate need to really try to catch up and keep on top of what's going on with AI and this sheer madness pressure that I'm putting on myself, and realize it's like, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be easier than you think. It's going to roll out to consumers. You're going to be able to step into it. You just have to be aware that the wave is coming and you have to paddle a little bit.
That's
But
right.
it will carry you. You don't have to be, the most leading expert. You just have to be leading by a little bit.
And
I'd
that
like to
is
push that a little bit further, but
And
take the
that, but that's the pressure that I think we all put on ourselves when we get involved, obsessed, and invested in learning something new or trying to produce something new. Same thing happened for me when I started to produce this podcast. Is that I was like, I have to get it perfect. I have to learn all these things. We have to get all the equipment right, and stepping one little step at a time as you are immersed, it carries you through. It's like that trusting that you'll take that next step in faith and that what you need will show up. I mean, it's the entrepreneur's journey. It is like the way of getting out of our own way, and we're basically describing the cusp of someone's comfort zone right here.
yeah.
Is you get interested and obsessed, and then you're like, oh crap, I know enough to know that I know nothing, and I'm already in
Yeah.
motion.
And the
um
idea that just because something is important right now doesn't mean it stays important.
yeah.
And that you need to reassess those things. Like, I've got to really focus on this. Okay, do you still have to today? Like, take a moment, reassess. Where are you?
Yeah,
Rack the focus from micro to macro and back and forth.
and I want to just tease out the necessity for relaxing. The more important it is, the more crucial it is you learn how to sink into that trust space, so that you trust yourself to do what it is that you can do, and not feel like most of us get in our head about the perfection of what it is we're up to, what we're trying to accomplish, or what we're heading towards in the ultimate, that we have to be there, we have to arrive already at the outset.
Mhm.
The more pressure we put on ourselves, like you were saying, my other classes were suffering because I was stressed out, feeling like there was no way I could possibly do this idea of perfection in my head, of doing this class well, or doing this job well, or learning this next phase well. So learning how to surrender and learning how to trust oneself and relax into the flow, I think is really important. Just, you got to paddle a little bit. The momentum's going to carry you forward, and like, be prepared that it's not going to be, perfect. When we start something new, what we produce is better than what we did the last time. If it's the first one, the leap from 0 to 1 is much greater than the leap from 1 to 2.
Fail often, but learn from your failures.
Hell yes. I mean, I joined a community choir when I was out here. Talk about solfege. And this past week they were like, by the way, you're gonna sing the bass line in your range, but read bass. I'm like, I've never read the bass line in my life. I can't get down that far. Also, like, I didn't memorize all of the note placements and the names of the notes, A through G. I'm like, the bass line is totally foreign to me. But I sat next to a bass, and I was like, I think I can intuit the interval between these notes and sing it decently well. So I officially am now singing the bass line for a performance this summer. It's incredibly wild, but it's like stretching me in ways that, like, I never considered before. I'm like, maybe I do know these notes. Maybe I just have to dust off what I think I learned once upon a time about how this bass clef functions. And oftentimes we forget that we have known things, and we forget that we have had experiences in some kind of tangential way to what we're up to now. And the remembering is what comes back to us as we're in motion.
Yeah, I once heard it phrased as, the more you learn, the less you know. Look forward to the day when you know nothing.
Say that again.
The more you learn, the less you know. Look forward to the day when you know nothing.
I'm gonna write that down.
I don't know who the quote is attributed to.
Yeah, and I've heard people describe really masterful practitioners as they've forgotten more than you ever learned. So get ready. And that's just the thing, is that we've got a very powerful what is it called? Mainframe. We've got a powerful mainframe up here that is agile and that stores things in very weird ways. And, you know, going back to your exploration and your obsession over AI and having to kind of reel yourself out so that you can be more relatable to your friends and colleagues out here. What have you ever gone into this kind of deep dive in a different topic before?
Oh, so many times. It's kind of my jam. I go
Uh-huh.
professionally, that's what I did for a living. Was I would do deep dives. I would go into a client and brand new client, I would do a deep dive of research before I walked in the door. When I walked in the door, I was doing an observational deep dive, picking up every little piece of information I could off of, notes on a billboard or left on a table. And then I'd go into my meeting like fully prepared and I'd be able to land the client. And then I would do a deep dive, now that I had permission, into their company, understanding as much of their company as I possibly could and what their needs were of everybody at every different level. And then I'd go back to the owner and create a proposal. But during that time, it was, yeah, I'm soaking in everything as fast as I possibly can.
And how has that methodology paid off in your life at large?
I don't know that I can say I would recommend it for everybody. It is one of my skill sets. You learn what your superpowers are, right? You learn what is it that I do or that you do very well, and then you figure out, how do I use that skill to accomplish this task? And that doesn't mean that two people with different skills can't accomplish the same task. They might start in different directions. So for me, it was the ability to process massive amounts of data and see the patterns, see the organizational structure, see how things relate to one another, and then identify where things don't look right, and then come up with a plan from there. That is the skill set that I really have. I just applied it to computers and technology, and it worked out pretty well for me. But it is not always the right thing. It's interpersonally, that can create some challenges.
Say more.
No, because I go in all super intense. I learn everything I possibly can. I pick up on every little thing and I process. Then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I got to figure it out. And people don't like being figured out.
No, we don't. We like to be spontaneous and innovative.
Yeah, I saw that coming.
Yeah. You know me well. But part of the magic of that interpersonal dynamic is, becoming obsessed with a person or a community helps you to adapt and to like create that next version of you. So I just want to like highlight the fact that like your your propensity to go deep, go wide, and then like arrive at an answer is now being challenged in your personal life. So professionally, this was the way to do it. It impressed everyone in one business, and dropping those systems or that those principles into your personal life, you're starting to aggregate different results and different information.
Absolutely.
I
Well, I
remember
mean, the company that I developed and eventually sold was called Deep Tech. That name was not, purely ironic. And
right.
now I'm trying to work on deep question mark.
Very good. So I mean, the thing that I noticed witnessing your move about what 300-400 miles from your point of origin to where you wound up was that you also approached the moving process very much the same way. And so for those of you who are analytics out there, whether that be real estate investors looking to deploy private capital or folks that are in engineering and need to understand everything before making a move. This might sound very much like your process, where we have to survey the landscape, do all of the intellectual knowledge, figure out who else are the players, and do a deep dive, in Craig's words, on who they are and how they operate before we can even conceive of ourselves doing something similar, executing that type of plan. Now, I will tell you from the other camp, the emotionally driven, relationship driven camp, is that for me to feel like I am ready to make a move or ready to take action, I need to feel connected with the people who will be resources and allies for me. So much like the analytic has to learn the information and understand it conceptually, for those of us who are a little bit more experience driven or emotionally driven, feeling connected to and safe with the people involved is very much, it's the same thing, just translated into a more emotional landscape. Is that feeling like I know the people, I know the players, I can trust that, if I ask a question that it's going to be received for me. So for when I made my move from my point of origin to 350 miles away, I started looking at who will I be doing business with over there? How will I be able to integrate into like my lifestyle? Are there people who are like me over there? Are there people who share some of my values? So for me, it was very much about making the right partnerships, the right connections, demonstrating to people that I was trustworthy, because that was what enabled people to trust me and for me to be able to make my decision like, yes, this checks my boxes. I feel like I can create anything from the space of knowing that the people around me will be supportive or helpful to whatever I try to create. So for you, knowing that you were, moving to into a business and wanting to win their business, you had this technical landscape. And for those of us with the emotional landscape, there's a very similar trajectory of immersion, assertion, and then execution.
I think one of the major growth points for me was when I started to understand the way it was that I took on anything and where my skill set lies. But the next big step for me was understanding the diversity of different approaches, valid approaches based off of other people's skill sets, and starting to assess other people's skill sets and say, I can't make that person do it my way. That doesn't work. They have this skill set. I need to trust them to do it with the tools that they've got. And once I started realizing that, that's how I started assembling my team of finding people with diverse skill sets, diverse methodologies, align them all to a common goal, and recognize that one of these methods is going to resonate more with the problem than others. And then get your ego out of the way and say, fine, for this project, you should take lead. Or for this customer, because the matching personality types, or because you have exactly the opposite personality type as the customer. Sometimes that's the way you want to go. But understanding that there's a lot of different ways of looking at a problem, and that you're not responsible for necessarily mastering them all.
Oh, that is so key. That is so key. That is so key. When I started this podcast, I was not a podcast listener. Still not an avid podcast listener. I dip into other people's stuff for research purposes, and when I find resources, I'll open it up. But that was one of my major resistances, is like, well, how can I do a podcast if I am not a podcast in devouree like my husband is? But I had a resource. I had somebody else who did it. So I'm like, okay, let me figure this out. And so knowing that people are unique in their approaches, unique in their skill sets, and being able to say, I'll know when to deploy this strategy, or I'll know when to connect with this person, because I don't have to be the master of all of these things. It's like you release yourself from the onus of being jack of all trades, master of none, and really can now focus then in becoming the master of where your main skill set lies. So would you consider the immersive, obsessive nature of finding out what is new and trending, especially in the world of technology, one of your main skill sets?
Yes. I mean, it's really about just consuming information and trying to put it in context.
Mm.
Figuring out how everything integrates. Integration is my big thing. How does this work? How does this interface with everything else? And what is the sum of all the parts?
So
Is kind of my thing.
get your crystal ball out.
All right.
And knowing what you know now about the AI revolution and how you do anything is how you do everything, what will be some of the things we'll need to think about, some of the patterns you're starting to pick up and recognize where people can now leverage this and dial into their own mastery with the volume of applications of AI? Where do you see it impacting first, where we can kind of ride that wave and know that we'll be able to leverage it and not feel consumed or taken over or made obsolete by it?
Oh, being made obsolete by it. I think it's going to be extraordinarily disruptive. I think the way it gets applied is going to shift dramatically based off of the collective human experience and personalities and culturalisms. So it may not go the same way in different areas of the country or within different countries. Regulations are going to come too late, and they're going to be malformed because currently we're running in a geriocracy, and the people who are making the rules have no idea about this stuff. They're getting it third hand from somebody's grandsons explaining it to them on the way to the Congress or whatever. So I think that it's up to us to figure out how we're going to use it, but it's whoever figures it out first gets to blaze the trail, and a lot of people are going to be following other people's footsteps. So I think that you're seeing already a lot of consolidation. A lot of companies are all jumping on ChatGPTs as the way. I think it's going to be sort of like Google way back when there was a lot of different search engines, and suddenly the universe sort of consolidated. So where Google became, a verb, and now it is synonymous with search, although that's only a small part of their business. But I think the same thing is going to happen with AI, and there are going to be other AIs that come out. They're going to be more application specific or industry specific or so forth. I think Apple's new approach from what they just announced last week is, or actually this week, is a fundamentally different approach. They are moving it towards personal assistant, and they're really focused on security. And I think that's going to be a really big thing. And they've got a lot of background in that, and everyone else seems to be looking at trying to figure out how to monetize it first and how to get it out and get big fast instead of getting it right.
So dial that in for a second. Apple's, first of all, I was on the phone with you and you're like, all these misleading headlines about what Apple's actually doing. Grr. Thank God we're a few days beyond that. Thank you very much. So distilled wisdom out of their approach, you said, is more focused on the long haul, it sounds like, and more security and protection based. Say more.
Well,
if I've got that wrong, correct me.
As I understand it right now, the current elements of AI is it's interactive. You talk to it, you type things, it produces a result back, but it doesn't actually do things for you. It doesn't take actions. It basically feeds you back something that you then do something with. Write an email, not go receive an email and automatically send a response by yourself. Take care of this responsibility for me. It doesn't do that. It makes suggestions, and it tends to not know anything about you personally. It knows general knowledge. It's connected to the internet. Apple's approach seems to be that they're going to be making it local AI that'll function on your computer, not on the internet. That's some big thing, which means that you have privacy. It will know you, access to your calendar, your life, and the local AI will be responsible for doing things for you, interacting with your computer, taking care of messages, understanding your schedule, understanding your life, and making suggestions based off of who you are, which you don't want to necessarily get out to the public domain. So by having on a local computer, a mini brain, but think of it as like your conscious mind performing tasks, and then you've got the internet version of AI, which is more like your subconscious. It's doing a lot of the big stuff, the general stuff. It's the general knowledge, and that the two AIs will work cooperatively. that one knows everything about you as your personal assistant, keeps your secrets, and then when it needs to like understand things out there in the world, it asks some other service.
And so how does Apple, and if you know this, great. If it's still a remaining question, we'll talk about it some other time. But how does Apple address the concern of like something that knows me intimately that can then be subpoenaed or used against me in some fashion in the future? Are they addressing this secure, like you said, they're focusing on the security aspect. Are they addressing the privacy of information as well as this develops?
Based off of the keynote, it seems that they're very much aware of that. How they're actually doing it, I mean, this is still on the early stages, so all of this is somewhat theoretical.
Yeah, so the early adopters are the ones that are taking all that risk right now.
Well, yes, but I mean, Apple's trying to keep it all encrypted and so forth, and they're trying to provide the same level of protection as you have as your personal data that's on your phone. So then it really becomes one of legal things as to whether or not you can be forced to decrypt. And there are cases that have happened, and there are more cases pending as to what your obligations are, the ability for government to get into your systems and subpoena your AI and ask it questions. But this is all going to be very new territory, and that's what I'm a little afraid of, is that I think that the technology is way ahead of where our government is, and the government might try to either make reactionary laws that are too broad, as we're doing this for your safety, but that might actually create substantial complications with the technology because they don't understand how a simple change of wordage could create or destroy entire industries. Likewise, they could be too far behind and create a law that is easily walked right around through a little change of code.
Oh,
So it's
interesting.
it's going to be, I think it's ultimately going to fall to the individual to have to navigate themselves, how to keep things secure. And I think it's always been, always comes down to a degree of personal responsibility.
Yeah, so like for those of us who scroll through privacy notices, click yes, and just move on like there's no other consequence and someone's going to take care of it. This is the age where now we are going to need to train up and understand all of that verbiage for ourselves. So, I mean, what it brings to mind is um, the oh shit, there's a saying that's like the privatization of the profits and the do you know what I'm talking about, where they privatize the profits but they
But they publicize the risk.
yes, that's it.
Yeah,
So the risk is really on the general public, and the profits from these systems are largely inaccessible. So like you had mentioned back when Facebook was just getting some mass popularity, that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And we're starting to see some of the ramifications of that being able to be codified down to our skivvies and how we handle stress and depression, because they have algorithms that can figure us out to that degree psychologically.
well, I think it's
How
going to be
does, go
I think
ahead.
it's going to be even more so with AI, because when you start having conversations with it, you can start developing what you think of as a relationship with it and end up revealing a lot more about yourself than you would otherwise. I think the better parallel of this is like when social media was first coming out, people didn't really think about the repercussions of what they said online. There was this general thing, well, I'm anonymous, but nobody's really anonymous. And that what goes on the internet stays on the internet. And that it took a while for people to realize they actually had to manage their social media presence. That if you don't curate it, you can put a bad message out and you can stigmatize and brand yourself and alienate yourself from communities that you'd like to be a part of because on a random Tuesday you said an inappropriate thing. That manifested into cancel culture, and there's a lot of different things that weren't really concepts that we had before social media. And I can't help but think, what are the parallels that are going to happen in an AI integrated society?
Yeah.
What
So
are the things you're going to have to learn about how to manage your own utilization of it, so that you are being responsible and that you can understand the consequences of how you use it or how it could be used, and steer that way, because I don't think it's appropriate to necessarily say, well, it's somebody else's problem to fix.
Nope. And that's it. It's what Jack Canfield talks about is like his number one principle of success. It's like personal responsibility. The formula he uses is event plus response equals outcome. So if you manage all your responses to things, you can affect the outcomes. Or if you continue to knee jerk or unconsciously react, the outcome will decide itself because of your unconscious decision making. So we're really entering an age where personal responsibility is going to be currency. Knowing how to manage yourself and being able to show, teach, and share with others the way. Like, I'm very grateful for your brain, because I happen to be one of those people who swipes, clicks accept, and hopes for the best in a lot of ways. But I don't know what I don't know. So I have to hope that there are folks that are engaged enough and who can decrypt, for lack of a better word, who can decode the information that's coming out on the leading edge, so that 2 or 3 rings back, I can go, so how does this apply to me, and what do I need to know, because I don't have the mastery to understand it at that level. So I just want to say thank you again for coming and giving us this like worldview around emerging disruption, because I think it's a conversation that is really only getting started out there. And to hear it from your perspective, having been in technology for 2+ decades, it's really valuable to me personally. And I know that it's valuable to the people who are out here signing on and listening to these conversations, because our conversation around AI was the most watched episode in my first 55 episodes that have been aired. So it tells me we're on to something. And so we're going to continue to deliver. If you have questions about how this world is emerging and what are some of the things we might need to be paying attention to going forward, this is a conversation Craig and I have committed to bringing what we're thinking about, whether it's this topic or other, on a more regular basis here. So type in your questions and we'll try to incorporate that in next month's broadcast. But for now, for this time, thank you so much for joining us for this special edition, and we look forward to seeing you back real soon. Let us know in the comments what it is that's up for you, so that we can have Craig and I do our individual and symbiotic style obsessions, and come back to you with some interactive and hopefully inspiring and engaging dialogue that helps you move the needle forward in this age of disruption. Craig, thanks a million as always.
My pleasure.
See ya.
Good to see you.